Good evening, Cardinals players, and good evening, Cardinals parents, and welcome to our Dugout Chatter session number 7. Tonight, our special guest is CJ Nitkowsk. CJ, you're in Atlanta right now, right?
That is correct. Yeah. After we left the New York, New Jersey area, my wife and I, we actually moved down to Texas for a little bit, stayed down there for 10 years. Bought a house there when I was playing for the Astros, and then I played for the Braves in 2004. We liked it here a lot, and so we ended up moving to Atlanta. So that is now our full-time home.
So for our Cardinals players, here's a bit of an introduction to CJ. He played his high school baseball here in New Jersey, up in Bergen County at Don Bosco Prep, went to St. John's in Queens, was a first-round draft pick of the Cincinnati Reds in 1994, and 1 year later was on the mound making his major league debut in 1995 with Cincinnati. Boy, talk about a quick whirlwind trip, CJ, to go from college baseball to the major leagues in that short amount of time.
Yeah, it really was. And, everything happened so fast for me, even leading up to that draft. You know my story. I love telling my story because I hope that it gives, young baseball players some hope because it's so competitive right now. Much more than when I was a kid. I think we all feel like we have to be the best right now, and parents probably feel that way as well, and they feel some pressure. But I was pretty average when I was at Bosco. I mean, I was a good pitcher for us, but when you start thinking about the bigger landscape, I didn't have a lot of opportunities. I didn't have a lot of colleges beating down my door and asking me to come pitch for them. Even though I ended up at St. John's, I actually went to a Division II school. At first, I went to Florida Atlantic, and they're now Division I, but they were Division II at the time. And so I went down to FAU for a year first after I was done at Don Bosco, and didn't get drafted and did not break 80 miles an hour in high school. I did not once. It wasn't until I got to college and still I started throwing a lot harder. And then, like I said, it just went so fast. So I got drafted June 2nd, 1994. I signed the very next day. So I was signed June 3rd. And June 3rd, the next year, I actually made my big league debut. So it was a calendar year from the day that I signed. I had a very aggressive general manager in Jim Bowden with the Reds who wanted to move me along quickly, and he did. And there were some pluses and some minuses that go along with being rushed to the big leagues, but it was a whirlwind for sure.
And a 10-year Major League Baseball career that included stints with both the Mets and Yankees here locally. He played overseas. He played in Japan and Korea, and a broadcast career that includes Mets, Yankees, Fox Sports 1, MLB Network. You do a radio show for MLB on Sirius XM as well. How many days a week is that?
So usually a couple of days a week. I go Tuesdays and Thursdays where I do the leadoff spot with Steve Phillips, who was the former general manager of the New York Mets. I've been doing that for a few years. And then on Saturdays, I do a show with Ryan Spilborghs, who played in the big leagues for about 7 years with the Rockies. That show's called Loud Outs. We do that at 10 o'clock Eastern. So usually on average about 3 shows a week. We have a lot of guys. We'll fill in and help each other out. So sometimes it could be 4 or 5 days a week, but it's usually about 3 days a week that I'm doing radio in addition to my duties with the Texas Rangers.
And that is where CJ is now, in the broadcast booth with the Rangers. And he also appeared in the movie 42, which came out in 2012, and also played himself in the Fox Network TV series Pitch. So you bring quite the resume to us here. And thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
You got it. Swiss Army knife, right? I mean, it's like being a utility player or just a guy. And nowadays, it's smart to be a utility player. But I loved what I did playing. I love what I'm doing broadcasting, and the idea of being able to do as many jobs as you possibly can until you find the one that seems to fit for you. And maybe that might mean 2 or 3. And then the TV and the movie stuff, I just got kind of lucky on. It just fell in my lap. I really wasn't looking for it. I wasn't trying to be an actor. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And those were some really cool experiences being in that movie 42. Of course, Chadwick Boseman played Jackie Robinson, and he went on to become a huge star after that.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to have CJ on is his youngest son, Luke, is 12. And in Georgia, you guys have been playing baseball for a few weeks now. We are about to start on Monday, June 22nd. We have our first set of practices, and we'll be practicing for a couple of weeks and hopefully returning to play in early July. CJ, what did you do to get Luke ready as you were coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, so they started their practices and then they shut everything down. And so we took it easy. We did not continue to throw and hit. Obviously, we have the advantage of the weather here in Georgia, so the opportunity was there. But we went ahead and took a little bit of time. He is 12 years old. He's probably average height, but he's a little skinny, so I always worry about his arm. And he has a pretty good one, so I'm very cautious with his arm. So we did take a little bit of a break, take it easy. We would continue to hit. We do have a cage in the backyard, so that was pretty easy to do, but we didn't throw nearly as much. And I'm glad we didn't, because between spring, summer, and fall, young arms get used now more than ever. I grew up without fall baseball, and I think that was one of the reasons that I got to pitch until I was 39 years old, and coming from the Northeast and not having nearly the same amount of arm abuse that a lot of, I say abuse, but the overusage that guys had from the South and the warmer places. So I'm always very careful with his arm. So we took a little bit of a break for a while on the throwing side. As I mentioned, we continued to hit. We started practices, I want to say it was about May 7th or so, somewhere in there. And we went a couple of weeks of practices, and kind of they left it up to parents. Not all the kids and families were ready to come back. Most were, but not all of them. And then we started games. And so we have been playing, I guess we're about 22 or 23 games deep now. We just had a couple of games this morning in a perfect game tournament, which was fun. We have been struggling pretty badly. We were 1-7 our last 8, so it was nice to win both of our pool play games today. And we'll be the 2 seed tomorrow when we get going in bracket play.
What's the return been like for you? What kind of restrictions do you have in Georgia right now?
So it all depends on which tournament you're playing in. So actually today with the perfect game tournament, we were not allowed to hit in the cage as a group. Like you kind of get there early, you get to the cages and you go to hit, and they actually kick the teams out of the cages. Every tournament has been a little bit different. The very first one we played in, which was, I guess, maybe middle to end of May, and the kids, I'm telling you, you're going to love this. Parents were not allowed anywhere near the field. Like they weren't allowed in. They had to watch the game from so far away. I remember asking my son, like, hey, how you doing with it? You can barely like really hear or see the parents because they were beyond the outfield wall, or this field that we were playing at was kind of neat. It was sunken in a little bit and the stands were high, but they were empty and the families had to be behind that. And he's like, I got to tell you, Dad, I kind of like it. So I think for every kid that understands and your parents are passionate and they love you and they care about you, but sometimes they get a little overzealous. We're all guilty of it. And so that was a nice little break for the kids. They asked basically that you would social distance. It's a little bit tougher with the kids once you get in the dugout. I think for a parent, once you make the decision to start playing and you feel comfortable, I don't know if you're really going to be able to keep those kids 6 feet apart, especially in tiny dugouts. My son helped out another team today because they were short another team in our organization. They were not allowed to be in their dugouts, he said. I didn't go to that game with him later, but he said they were actually not allowed to be in the dugout. They had to sit outside the dugout, but he said they still kind of all sat close together anyway, so he wasn't sure what the difference was. Early on, we did have to wear masks, and they asked, and it's been optional here in Georgia, but they asked people to wear masks and fans and everything else. So there's been all that kind of stuff, and making sure kids are washing their hands, and if you don't feel well, don't go to the ballpark, don't go to practice, don't go to games, all of that stuff. Umpires were behind the pitchers for a little while, which was a little awkward. I asked some of the umpires how they felt about it. It's a different perspective for them. And so the strike zone, the calls, and we know when you're 12 years old, and really for all of us, for amateurs, I coach now, so I consider myself in the amateur game as well. We know we're not getting the best umpires anyway. They're doing the best that they can, but they did struggle a little bit calling. It took a little while, I think, for them to get comfortable calling the pitches from behind the pitcher. I thought they would like it more, but all the umpires I talked to said they did not. They would much rather be behind the catcher. They are behind the catcher now, though. They have been for the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, they've been talking about doing both here in New Jersey. I think it depends on the age level. For the 60-90 distances, what I saw most recently, CJ, was the umpire would be behind home plate and not behind the mound. And I've done a couple scrimmages. As you know, I coached up at Don Bosco, your alma mater, for a while. And I remember during some inter squads, I was standing behind the mound calling balls and strikes, and it was awful. And the players are just over me. It was brutal. And umpiring, as you know, is a job where you have to be perfect to start out and better as the game goes along. Yeah,
that's right. Oh, yeah. Of course. Nobody's there to see the umpire. Nobody's cheering for the umpire, and you're only going to get booed. And rarely are people telling you what a great job you're doing. After the game, we like to say that, but it doesn't happen too often during the game. So I would say, to parents, I think this goes for all the time, but especially now as things have been a little tense, be a little extra patient with the umpires. I will tell you, we had the nicest guy behind the plate today, and he actually had both games. And he's a paramedic too, which was kind of that's a nice thing to have a paramedic as an umpire working your games. And he was super nice. He had a terrible, terrible strike zone. I mean, I almost felt bad. He rung up a kid from the other team on a ball that was clearly in the dirt by like a lot. And he still rung him up. He had a very, very low and wide strike zone. And so it was ended up being a long day for hitters when it was all said and done.
CJ, you mentioned that you did not play fall ball when you were in high school. Were you a multi-sport athlete in high school?
Not really. So I played basketball for a couple of years at Don Bosco, but once my sophomore year rolled around, I realized that basketball was not going to be my future. So it was partially because there really wasn't fall ball available. I graduated in 1991. There wasn't a lot going on. I did play a little bit of fall baseball my senior year. So I guess I lied a little bit. My last year, I did play some fall baseball, and we really didn't have travel baseball that much either at that time. I did a little bit, but nothing compared to what you guys have available now and all the programs that are in place, which I think are just fantastic. But I did play basketball. I'm a big believer in being a multi-sport athlete as long as you can. Even if you're not good at another sport, play another sport. You will not find a college scout, a professional scout around the game that says they really love one-dimensional athletes. They love to know that you're playing other sports if you can. And I know sometimes there's a little bit of pressure there to kind of get focused on what might be your best sport. And if baseball's it, should that be the only one that you're locked in on? But I'm telling you, you will not find people that scout this game and look for talent that like one-dimensional athletes that only play one sport. Not to say you can't be that guy, but if you have a chance to play another sport, even if it's at the rec level, like my son plays rec basketball as an example here. The rec basketball program goes all the way through your senior year in high school. So even if you don't make the high school team, the county we live in, it just happens to be really big with amateur basketball, that they have a rec league that goes all the way through your senior year. And so I think it's a good idea to play another sport as long as you possibly can if baseball is your first love.
A couple of our most recent guests that we've had on our Zoom sessions, CJ, Ty Blankmeyer, son of Ed Blankmeyer, and Ty is now a scout for the Milwaukee Brewers. And we had Darren Fenster, who's in the Red Sox organization, played at Rutgers and coached there as well.
He's a great follow on Twitter.
Oh, he's tremendous.
Yeah.
Darren's one of the best on Twitter. Yep. Both of them talked about the importance of being an athlete, not just a baseball player, but being an athlete.
Yeah, and it's important. And I will tell you that I'm not really a great athlete. Like I figured out I could do one thing decently, and that was, throw a baseball with my left hand. I like to play golf. And like I said, I played basketball for a little bit, but yeah, you want to be an athlete first. And even I know like we do, and I'm guilty of it sometimes where we get, we can get really drill heavy, or we can, sometimes get too instructional during like say a batting practice session. But Darren that's a good guy that I'll watch and listen to some of the stuff he tweets and talking about just being athletic, even in some of the drills that you do, as opposed to getting too mechanical and thinking about mechanics, especially when you're young, right? I mean, to give you an idea of how it's really all about raw talent, the Rangers, I think they had the 14th overall draft pick this year, and they took a second baseman out of Mississippi State. And I'm listening to our director of scouting talk about him. That's a good player. He's a first-round pick coming out of a huge college program. And they talked about what they like about where he is right now, but how he's got so much to work on, essentially. Like he's a good athlete, he's a good bat-to-ball guy, he can hit the ball well, but they know they have a lot of work to do with him defensively. And if you were to see him, you'd be like, this guy's great. But even for them, knowing where he is now as a first-round pick, there's still so much more to do. So being an athlete first is the most important thing. And it's helpful in high school and college if you got some polish to you, if you know how to play the game and do the little things well, if you're a pitcher that knows how to hit spots and you have good off-speed pitches, all that stuff is great. But there's something about the raw athleticism and really focusing on that, especially when you're young. I think it's really important.
Over the course of your career, you were with 10 different major league teams. You went up and down through the minors a number of different times. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask you about this, but I'm sure you have a question about Luke's outing the other day, which was one of the funniest things. I'll let you tell the story, CJ, because it's a whole heck of a lot funnier. But over the course of CJ's career, he played for 40 different managers at the professional.
Between all the places that I stopped over the world, I ended up having 40 different managers. I went back and counted after I was done. Now that's the Dominican Republic, that's Korea, that's Japan. You mentioned 10 different teams in the big leagues, 2 more in the minor leagues that I played with the Pirates and the Cardinals, who I did not reach the big leagues with, and then even spent a spring training with the Twins, but did not get to the big leagues with them. So a lot of exposure. But yeah, it's so interesting that for my wife, she also went to St. John. She played softball there. She's from Central New Jersey. She likes to brag that she won more state championships as a softball player than I did as a baseball player. We did get one when I was at Don Bosco my sophomore year, which of course was a really cool and fun moment. I still have my jacket and my ring back here from when we won the entire thing. But she knows the game well, I guess is my point. And she's been with me. We've been together my entire career. So all those ups and downs that you were talking about, she was on that roller coaster with me, ups and downs and ups and downs. And we love doing it, but we're happy that that level of stress is over. And what I do now in the media is a lot more consistent. And so she'll poke fun at me. We're a little sarcastic in our house. And Luke, my son, had a rough outing. We were playing on some small fields, and we were playing a pretty good team. We jumped out to a 4-0 lead and ended up losing 21-5. He had let up a home run. His buddy came in behind him, let up back-to-back home runs. Like, it was just a rough day all the way around for our pitching staff. And my wife said to him after the game, and she says, well, Luke, she said, listen, at least you still get to live in our house. You know, when Dad pitched bad, we usually had to move. And it's true. I mean, there were so many times where she'd be at a game and maybe things weren't going well. And then I had a really bad one and she's just waiting for the phone to ring. Like, hey, I got sent down, I got traded, I got released, whatever it may be. There was just a lot of that over the 19 years that I played. And so even though she was having some fun and trying to make him feel better at my expense, there was a lot of truth to that. It just really, you know, it was a lot of honesty. And she doesn't mind at all trampling on me to help her youngest feel a little bit better.
Did you have a moving company on speed dial?
Well, you know, we really did become professional packers. I mean, the idea of how quickly we could pack up apartment, get everything together, and move on to the next thing. It's, you know, it's almost unusual to be sitting still in the same spot for so long. Like, this is my 4th year with the Texas Rangers, and this is the longest consistent job that I've had without any interruption. You know, I played 5 years in Detroit, but it was broken up over 2 different stints. And so the idea of actually having one job for 4 years, I'm now 47 years old. It's the first time I've been in the same job that I made it for a 4th year.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, you've done some acting, as we mentioned. You were on that Fox TV show, Pitch, and you also had a role in the movie 42. And obviously, if you've watched the news at all over the past few weeks, you know that Black Lives Matter has become a hot button issue. It's been that way for a while, but especially lately what's happened. And CJ, there were 2 scenes in that movie that immediately come to mind. And one is the dad with the little boy. He's probably 9 or 10. And they're at the game, and you can tell the dad is trying to teach his son about baseball. And it's one of those heartwarming moments. And when I watched the movie the first time, all I could think about was sitting next to my dad as he's telling me about baseball when I was a kid. And his dad starts yelling at Jackie Robinson, and the kid doesn't quite know how to react, but he follows the lead of the adults, and the N-bomb comes out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you could just feel the theater gasp at that moment, this loss of innocence. The other scene was the manager of the Phillies, and he is just all over Jackie in this one particular scene, just screaming at him. And the N-word is just coming out again and again and again. What was it like for you making that movie? Granted, it's a few years ago, but still, like I said, this has been a topic for quite some time. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I will tell you, you know, first of all, I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to do it. I just, again, happened to be in the right place at the right time. And it was such an honor to be a part of it. And they actually sent me a couple different scripts. The way the thing first worked out is they had asked me, they were just looking for baseball players that lived in this area to be in the background so that so the scenes would look right. And when I met the casting director, she's like, you know what do you think about maybe reading for a couple of roles? Like, just like one line here and there. And I'm not an actor, and I'm not chasing any kind of acting career. And I said, yeah, why not? I'll give it a shot. Like I said, I'll try just about anything. And there was a bunch of different one-liners, and I ultimately ended up getting the role of Dutch Leonard, who was a pitcher and just had kind of a little corny line when I'm facing Jackie Robinson. He popped up, but there was a couple of other lines in there, a couple of other characters where the N-word was used. And I was just like, you know what? I said, I'm not going to read for that role. I said, I appreciate the opportunity. I know it's just, I know it's just acting. I know it's just a movie, but I said, yeah, this is probably the only movie I'm ever going to be in. And the idea that would be my role, I didn't feel right. And again, I know it's Hollywood and it's all make believe, but it didn't feel right. But so I did get this role of Dutch Leonard, and Ben Chapman was the name of the manager for the Phillies at the time. I was a member of the Philadelphia Phillies in my role. And so when Jackie comes up, if you ever see the movie where we kind of throw one like high and tight and knock him down, and we're kind of antagonizing him and not treating him particularly well. And so the manager comes on the top step, and as you mentioned, just saying awful, awful things. Now, I grew up in Suffolk, New York. I tell people all the time when I talk about this, I wouldn't know what that experience is like. And for a lot of us as a white man in this country, that's just not something that we can share in that experience. And to sit there and listen to it. And again, it's only a movie, right? I mean, there's all actors there. We're just taping this. Everybody knows what's coming. But to sit there and listen to that for hours. I mean, when you watch it, what's amazing about the way movies work is how much time they spend filming something and really only using a little bit of it. I remember asking one of the other actors, I said, I guess we shot they originally told me I was only going to work one day, and I ended up staying for 13. And just it ended up being much more work than I thought it was going to be, and it was fun. And I said, gosh, am I in this movie like a lot? I feel like, I'm constantly out here. He's like, you're going to be in this movie for like 30 seconds. He's like, it might seem like you're doing a lot of work, but they do a lot of work because they shoot from every different angle that they want, multiple takes all the time. And so for that scene in particular, the way that this was working is they were basically having 2 units at once. Like a lot of times they'll do things separately where they were taping 2 units at once. So they were taping all of his stuff, all the close-ups, everything else, while I'm standing on the mound and I'm shooting stuff in between breaks. And so we just heard it constantly. What you saw in the movie, which was, maybe a minute or two, we heard it for 7 or 8 hours. And it was so draining and it was so impactful, and it really caught me off guard. I never thought that sitting there listening to that in that kind of controlled environment would have any kind of effect on me. And I remember one of the makeup ladies, she had come to me, and it was, we shot this in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's supposed to be Brooklyn in April, and it's Tennessee in June, and we're sweating like crazy. And they don't want you sweating because you're supposed to be cold in Brooklyn in April for opening day. And so she was constantly having to fan me off and powder me and all this other stuff. And she just said to me, she's like, I can't wait till this day is over. Because she was doing that while they were filming that scene. So we can hear him screaming just these most awful things that any other human being could say to another. And it did. It really kind of surprised me that didn't see it coming, how impactful, how awful it was. And you could feel it again, even though it was only among actors. And so it was a pretty unique experience. But again, one that I felt fortunate and proud that I could be a part of.
And then you fast forward to the TV series Pitch that you were in. Not only is the character Black, but she's also female, the first female to get into the major leagues, which I thought was a really, really unique twist of all the different ways that they could have gone with that character. To take it in that direction, I thought was really something special.
Yeah, they wanted to do First Woman in the big leagues. Unfortunately, the show got canceled after 10 episodes. I had a couple of cameos, I think 3 or 4 cameos in it, but I served as a script consultant for that show. And I was working at Fox at the time out in California, and the head of Fox Sports, Eric Shanks, called me to his office, which, I got that call to the manager's office plenty of times when I got released or sent down, and I don't know why he would be calling me to his office, but he did, and there were some other people waiting there when I got there. It was the executive producer, Dan Fogelman of Pitch, who also, by the way, does This Is Us. So he's been really successful in his career, what he does on the TV side. And Eric Shanks, the president of Fox, said, hey, these guys are looking for someone to help them along with a baseball script, and I thought you would be a good guy for it. And they just wanted to meet with you and talk with you. And I did. And ultimately, they gave me that job. And it was first of all, it was a great job because it was super easy. But they would call me all the time and say, hey, we're writing this scene. How does this language sound? Was this how this would go down, or can you give us an idea here? Or does this sound authentic? So it was really neat to be able to do that and see the other side, kind of on the other side of the camera, and how things work and have that experience. But they had a really good storyline. They had great writers. The biggest thrill for me in that, though, I shot a cameo where basically the other main character, Mike Lawson, who was played by, I know you guys are probably all too young for this, but Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell was the guy that played Mike Lawson. So I was in a scene with him, which was really cool. But Regina King directed it. And I didn't even know she was directing that scene. Like, we just walk in to do our scene, and I see her sitting there, and she's, superstar in Hollywood with a really long career. Now she was doing this on the directing side. And so here I am doing a scene with Mark Paul Gosselaar to my left is kind of, a guy that I'm working with, and then Regina King directing it. So it was another really amazing experience, but I thought they did a good job with it. Unfortunately, it ended up not getting picked up.
So what are you hearing on your end in terms of when, if Major League Baseball starts up again? We're all just chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I know it's been frustrating. I know that we all want to see baseball happen. I think we're going to get a decision here probably over the next couple of days, whether it is Rob Manfred, our commissioner, implementing a schedule, which he is allowed to do. He can come in and say, we're going to play 54 games and it'll be at full salary for the players, and they would have to do that as long as they agree not to file a grievance. That's been one concern. But he would like to negotiate a deal with them. He would like to get a deal done have it negotiated, because then if they do that, we probably would see more postseason. Like, I don't know if you've heard the talk about maybe going to 14 or 16 teams in the postseason. Currently, baseball has 10. And so the idea of getting up to 16, I think would be fun, but that is something that the players have to agree to. So they can't come to an agreement on how many games and all these other things. Then Rob Manfred, if he has to implement a schedule, that means we don't get the extra postseason. But I think we'll get there.
And obviously, this could also affect the upcoming negotiations when this collective bargaining agreement, the current one, expires and they have to negotiate a new one. So there's a lot going on.
A lot going on. You're right.
CJ, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. For our players who want to follow you on Twitter, it's at CJ Nitkowsk. There's lots of great stuff that CJ posts there. And hopefully we get to see/hear you out of the Texas Ranger booth before not too much more time goes by.
Yeah, Jim, I hope so too. I mean, we all missed the game so much. I'm excited for you guys that you're going to get started here and get back out on the field and do your thing. I will tell you that once we got out, the kids were so excited, having so much fun. And we all need baseball, right? We all love the game. We love to play it. I love to work in it. I love to coach in it. And it's the greatest game, and we need it. We need our best players in the world to get back on the field, and I think that we will be there pretty soon.
We start on Monday, June 22nd. So Cardinals players, I'll see you on the field this coming week.